Hi there, and welcome to Ghostly Trails. I'm Robin Shuckburgh, and tonight I'm taking you on a journey into the world of spook and shiver. We continue our journey north, stopping off in Kirtlington. The haunting here centres around the pond that sits in the middle of this picturesque village and concerns the ghost of a famous 18th century aristocrat, Sir James Dashwood. Dashwood was not a popular man in the village. Having built the manor house at Kirtlington Park and lent his name to the Dashwood Arms in the village, he was buried in the Dashwood family chapel at the local church of St Mary's. It's unclear exactly why he was so unpopular. One theory is his inevitable support for the Enclosure Acts, which will have put him at odds with the common man, but then this would have been true of almost all landowners in the area. So perhaps it could have been because of his notorious uncle, Sir Francis, founder of the infamous Hellfire Club at West Wickham. After James's death, his ghost was said to be a thorough nuisance to the village, so much so that the locals eventually called on the local church to lay the spirit to rest. The clerics lured the spirit to the village pond and performed their exorcism to trap it there for eternity. Legend has it, however, that if the pond ever dries up, Dashwood's ghost will return and resume his terrorizing of Kirtlington. We will hear something similar once again later on in Burford, but for now we continue north towards Banbury, passing Hopcroft's Holt. An inn has stood on this site since the 15th century, and the most widely reported ghost at the Holt is that of highwayman Claude Duval. Duval came from an aristocratic background and was apparently, if somewhat incongruously, something of a pacifist. He was extremely polite to his victims when holding up stagecoaches during the 17th century. This gained him wide but mixed reputation of celebrity and notoriety, which eventually forced him to flee to France. Unwisely, in 1670, he returned to England, where he was promptly arrested and hanged for his crimes. There have been numerous sightings of Duval's ghost around the hotel, and there seems to be a variety of ways in which his phantom manifests itself. In room 3, guests have reported feeling as though they were being watched. Heavy footsteps have been heard echoing down the corridors, and a 20th century landlord heard voices in the attic with no obvious explanation. One guest even reported feeling his bed vibrate fiercely in the night. Our next stop is Deddington, an ancient market town and home to a handful of brief ghost stories. The old vicarage is said to be haunted by the ghost of Reverend Maurice Frost, who was vicar of Deddington from 1924 until his death in 1962. He appears to have had the skills of a poltergeist. If he takes a dislike to visitors, he disturbs their beds, throws books around, and alters all the clocks. Another spiritual presence seems to be that of a lady's maid. It is said that if you sit at a certain dressing table in the house, she will brush your hair. It seems she remains invisible whilst performing this service, causing some confusion for the recipients. Deddington is very close to the main road from the Midlands to Oxford and London, so unsurprisingly, several coaching inns were built here in the busy days of coach travel. To the rear of these inns was a paddock where the horses stayed overnight. One night, a heavy-handed groom was tending to a very lively horse when the animal reared up and struck him with his hooves, killing him instantly. For decades, the spot was reportedly haunted by the ghost of the groom. But now, with houses built on it and named the Paddocks, no sightings have been recorded since the 1930s. Another story tells of a tragedy in 1917, when two young boys, aged 13 and 16, from the Bowler family, were ice skating on the mill pond in nearby Clifton, when they both fell through the ice and drowned. Naturally, their mother was distraught, and their home at Eastleigh House is reportedly haunted by the sound of a woman weeping. A more careful look into the history of this tragedy suggests that the boys may actually have been swimming in the Cherwell rather than skating in Clifton, but the family tragedy is just as great, and the haunting continues. Just to the west of Dedington is the small village of Hempton. The road junction at the centre of the village is said to be haunted by a ghostly horseman. The sound of horses' hooves clattering by have been heard by many residents, and cyclists have reported being pushed off their bikes by an irresistible force out of the blue. Heading a little further north, we come to the village of Adderbury. The most famous haunting here is down St George's Lane, at the former home of Sir George Cobb. Sir George died in 1762, without leaving a male heir to inherit his title, and so the Cobb baronetcy became extinct. 4 grand old oak trees stood on his land, of which it seems Cobb was particularly fond. So much so that he made his relatives promise never to cut them down. Alas, some time after he passed away, it seems those promises were forgotten. The trees were felled, and Sir George is said to have returned in spirit, appearing at the very spot where the trees were cut down. His funeral coach can apparently be seen riding through the streets of Banbury after dark, and 2 poachers of old claim to have seen the black horses pulling it, breathing fire. So frightened were they by the sight that they promised never to go poaching ever again. A promise they are unlikely to have kept, however terrified they may have been. We find ourselves now at the northernmost point of our Oxfordshire tour, in the bustling market town of Banbury. The 17th century Whately Hall Hotel behind me is said to be haunted by a Catholic priest. As we've seen many times elsewhere, the persecution of the Catholics after the Reformation led many of their number to risk their lives and livelihoods in support of their religious colleagues. At this inn, the landlord would allow his fellow Catholics to use room 52 to meet and worship in secret. He agreed that whenever the authorities approached, often in search of religious dissidents, he would ring a bell to warn of their arrival. The people gathered in room 52 would make their way down a hidden stairway and escape to safety. On one tragic occasion, a mischievous servant by the name of John Houston decided to play a prank. Despite there being no sign of the Protestant authorities, and entirely for his own amusement, he rang the bell in order to make the Catholics panic and flee. Sadly, one of the Catholic number was an elderly priest called Father Bernard, who had a particularly weak heart. The warning bell caused him such panic that as he made his way down the staircase, he had a fatal heart attack. To this day, Father Bernard's ghost is said to walk the halls of the hotel, searching for the prankster. Around 100 years ago, the secret staircase was blocked up in an attempt to contain the spirit, but to no avail. Ye Olde Reindeer Inn on Parsons Street is also said to be haunted. As one of the oldest buildings in the town, it dates back to 1560, it's no surprise that a ghost has been spotted here. During the English Civil War, it was believed to have served as the headquarters of Oliver Cromwell's parliamentarian forces on a passing visit, but the town was a royalist stronghold for much of the war, and the resident ghost is a cavalier. He's said to appear on the upper floors, clad in a plumed hat and lace ruffs. Sadly, there have been no recent sightings. Just maybe the dowdiness of the 21st century has put him off. Banbury's ghost stories are a little thin on the ground, so we're leaving the town and travelling southeast towards Bicester. Backtracking to Adderbury and then turning off through Aynhoe, we eventually pass through the village of Salden. This road is the B4100 and runs parallel to the M40. It's said to be haunted by a phantom Morris 1000 Traveller. The Traveller is a distinctive wood-panelled estate car produced in Oxford during the 1950s and 60s, and there have been two separate sightings of this ghostly vehicle, 20 years apart. On both occasions it was seen on a foggy night in November, firstly in 1963 and then again in 1983. The car was seen parked in the middle of the road with no lights on, but when approached by passing motorists, it vanished into thin air. The exact location would seem to be just where the old Bear public house used to stand. The pub is no more, since it's been converted now into a private house. But if you take this route on a foggy night in November, be sure to drive with great caution. Carrying on towards Bicester, our next haunting could be found at Bicester House. Legend tells us that here a white lady can be seen wandering the house in search of lost treasure. During the Civil War, yes, it's that war again, so many ghostly legacies, the residents of the house were off fighting for the royalist cause, leaving the house in the care of a conscientious female member of the household staff. It wasn't long before parliamentary forces approached the town, and the lady wasted no time, taking as many valuables as she could possibly carry and throwing them into the nearby pond. The parliamentary troops arrived and searched the premises. So frustrated were they at finding nothing and having to leave empty-handed, they took out their frustration on the poor, unfortunate woman and murdered her. She is known as the White Lady of Bicester House, and her ghost has been seen roaming the house and nearby streets on the anniversary of her death in search of her hidden treasure. Unfortunately, that would seem to be an impossible task, as the pond has long since been filled in. Not much further down the road, the Crockwell Cavalier is said to appear to courting couples on the junction of St. John Street and Queen's Avenue. It is thought that this is the ghost of a soldier who died after falling down a well while fleeing the parliamentary army. The well was considered too dangerous and filled in around the turn of the 19th century. Further still down the street is the site of the former Bicester Priory, where on several occasions phantom monks have been seen wandering around. Elsewhere in the town, an old lady in Edwardian dress is said to haunt the old toll house in North Street, and some of the shops in Sheep Street have reported unexplained supernatural goings-on of various kinds. Many of the surrounding villages of Bicester also lay claim to some ghost stories. Weston Manor has a trio of resident ghosts: a 13th century nun, a dairymaid, and a woman known as Mad Maud. Large Ministry of Defence bases surround Bicester to the southeast, and it is rumoured that these establishments hide some ghostly secrets too, but perhaps unsurprisingly, the MOD is reluctant to confirm or deny such rumours. Fringford has some reported sightings of corpse lights, particularly around Fringford Mill in foggy winter weather. In Ambresden, it is rumoured that the devil built the church, but these folklore tales are perhaps for another time. We're making our way to Tame, stopping briefly at the village of Wheatley, and it's here that I will hand over to Paul Barrand for the next part of the journey. I'm certain you will enjoy Paul's debut on the channel, and I'll see you shortly picking up the trail again in Bampton.